Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Let's wave. Everybody wave.
Everybody's waving.
Thanks to Holly and Kevin Bott and Imagining America for giving us access to this incredible technology, and to Holly's expertise in making it actually function.
Yes.
Tia, do you want to start? You want to say something introductory?
Well, welcome to everyone. This is very exciting, and I'm glad you had the time to be here. It's a bit of a drabby day here in New Orleans, but that's not stopping us from smiling and being energized to learn more about distance learning. I'm going to really host the Q&A. So if you could send me a message so that I could make note of that. And when we get to the Q&A section of our program, we could then answer your questions. So I'll turn it over to Matt now to lead us through the program. So welcome.
So thanks again for everybody for coming. I introduce myself briefly. I'm an independent educator that's working with Xavier University of Louisiana. Tia and hopefully Renee Akbar will be joining us, along with Ron Bechet, who many of you know, Ross Lewis and Lisa Flanagan, all of whom are on the faculty at Xavier. And we're working together to develop a distance or hybrid distance learning program. So I am a real newbie to distance teaching, distance learning teaching. I was a graduate student of a very early online graduate program back in the 90s, when America Online was the main access point, and you always heard the "you've got mail." So that's how I date myself as far as the online graduate program that I was in. I became really in the last year or so very interested in distance learning as a way to teach community-based arts practice. And have spoken with many of you already about your opinions. And when I asked Kevin and Holly about kind of their sense of the Imagining America network and its investment in, on an individual basis, really, in distance learning, they said they didn't know themselves and were interested to find out. So that was the kind of motivation. They offered Tia and me the infrastructure, and we just kind of said, okay, we'll organize this conversation so that we'll learn from the rest of you, really, as much as anything, what's going on. Yeah, so as far as questions and answers, Tia will be moderating the main question and answer period. I'll be moderating the period with the panel, but my guess is we'll just have enough time for me to ask a couple questions, and then it'll kind of bleed into the general question and answer. I think that's it on the introduction. Let me rustle my papers for a second, and we'll go on to the rants. So Holly, could you come back on and lead us through that piece? We have 6 people who've already offered. I guess, Holly, if you're willing, if people want to add themselves to one of the 4 remaining slots, can they chat, just send a message to you and you'll put them into the queue?
Certainly, just chat your name, or just say I'd like to do a rant, because we have your names. So these are going to be 1-minute personal statements about distance learning, thoughts, comments. Matt had sort of sent out some info about that. Is it important to you? Do you have doubts about it? Different, whatever your perspective is. 60 seconds. I'm going to be timing, and I'll just give you a little notice when we're up. So the first person that we'll have go is Celeste.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everybody, I'm Celeste Carmichael. I work here at Cornell University as a program development specialist for our cooperative extension system, and a friend of Scott Peters, Dr. Scott Peters, who's with the Imagining American program, and ran into him last week and he told me about this. So thank you for letting me come on board. I don't know how much of a rant this is, but it is a little bit of an introduction. I worked for Extension for about 25 years, and the distance learning that I knew at the beginning was more like correspondence courses. And now, of course, we have lots of online courses that we use both for staff and for participants. Some are more like webinars, others are more like courses. There's some that, of course, are good and some that are not so good, but there's a lot of research behind online learning. And, you know, personally, I have been working to build my own credentials and learning more about the research and what makes a good online program work. Because online learning is in some ways less expensive. We have staff across the New York State that don't have the money to travel into Cornell to come to training programs. We have been relying pretty heavily on some online coursework, so we're trying to get better at that. And in this last year, I have entered into an instructional design of online program of online learning program at Quinnipiac University. So if there's a rant in all of this, it's just that it depends on the audience and it depends on the instructors and how engaging it's going to be. But if it's going to work, it has to be engaging, because learners learn from each other more than from top-down kind of strategy.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll have
welcome.
Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Nicole here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. In my role as a faculty in women's and gender studies at DePaul University in Chicago, I was able to undertake some professional development in course conversion and in online instruction. So I went into that sort of not sold, but understanding that online education is really important in our current educational market for students who have to work, students who are parents, students who need the flexibility of that kind of learning environment. But then once I started doing it, I got excited about a few things. I'm excited about students' abilities to pace themselves. I was surprised by their abilities to do that. I was also excited about my own questioning of moderating how much of my personal charisma is necessary to an educational experience. Turns out maybe not that much. I'm also excited about the ways that people for whom English is their second language, who are very proficient in English, but for whom it might be difficult to kind of follow an active discussion in class, are able to engage in discussions in that environment. I'm also excited about the possibility of folks participating in courses where they might feel embarrassed or like their subjectivity gets in the way of their being in the class. For example, in women's and gender studies, sometimes like cis male guys feel resistance to taking those classes. They feel like there's a lot of attention on them, but if they can participate in a way where like their body or the way that they look isn't so highlighted in the experience, that might be an entree to them participating in those challenging subject matters.
Okay, great. And then Cynthia Lawson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Lawson at the New School. As a faculty member, I teach community engaged courses at Parsons School of Design, but a few years ago took on a role in the Provost's office, and as Associate Provost, I oversee the Office of Online Education. I guess my rant has to do with language and the words that we choose to use with regards to this work. Specifically, I find the terms distance learning problematic. As it was already mentioned, that term really came out of correspondence courses. The first documented course of that kind is from 1728. And so it's surprising that we continue to use that same language. The issue I have with it, I think, can be exemplified with this call here, where we are sitting in very different geographical locations, yet there is a wonderful closeness in this interface that we're all looking at. I'm looking at the gallery view and seeing everyone side by side. My ability to be able to reach out to each of you and to be able to speak directly to each of you is much closer than what I could do in an in-classroom space, where perhaps you're sitting across the room and there's actually furniture and a physical distance between us that perhaps is more distant than the closeness that we can have in the online environment. And I find that the usage of the term distance learning is an invitation to continue to perpetuate these ideas that the online space is perhaps not as good or not as close as an on-site in-classroom face-to-face learning experience. So just an invitation that we could perhaps rethink the words, rethink the language. Here we use distributed. Perhaps there are other ways to talk about these kinds of interactions. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then Heather Eikmeier.
So I have to figure out how to unmute myself, my first challenge. Greetings, I'm Heather Eikmeier. I'm the Director of Program and Membership Strategy at the National Guild for Community Arts Education. And the Guild is a national service organization for nonprofit arts learning organizations. We serve a variety of organizations around the country. And so on the upside, we have, while we haven't done formal online courses, I think as we're talking about here, we have done a number of webinars, Zoom chats, and different types of online engagements with community arts education providers across the country. And so what's exciting to me is that I think the history of national service organizations, for speaking from my point of view, has been very hub and spoke. So there's an office that produces programming and outputs it to organizations and people around the country. What's exciting, I think, about the online space is that it can bring networks together by interest, by discipline, by program type, and also by geography, and really network those organizations and people in some very interesting ways that also sort of speak to what's happening nationally, but also can be very specific to what's happening in a local community. I guess my only maybe rant is just, I believe just actually last month there was an NPR story about the recent Pew study that came out that was looking at the preferences of adult learners. And after surveying something like 3,000 adult learners, found that their preferences were still very much place-based, that internet had a role, but that they were preferring the social space and the physical space of being together. And so maybe to Cynthia's point, I guess I'm curious to reimagine what place looks like in the online environment, how we create place and interaction. I think also, but depending on the age of the learner, a lot of adult learners are looking for that very social experience in learning and feel very isolated. So again, just how are we creating place in the online space and kind of so that it complements other learning spaces that we have.
So next we'll have Dudley.
Hi, I guess I'm introducing Dudley.
Yeah.
My name's Amy Brookes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the communications director for Roadside Theater, which is the theater wing of Appalshop, a Central Appalachian media hub and culture hub based in Whitesburg, Kentucky. We're interested in grassroots and populist iterations of distance learning. And the artistic director, Dudley, who is here with me, and I came away with some questions rather than rants. So if we look at the best practices of distance learning as innovation, something that's impactful, sustainable, and replicable, we wondered if innovation is weighted equally in our grassroots community cultural development practices. Since we teach communities to capitalize on human assets like first voice storytelling and lived experiences that are deeply instilled and derived from cultural heritage. So we wonder what the role of innovation is there. In areas like Central Appalachia, where we're based, where connectivity issues like broadband accessibility and transportation are an impediment to classroom and online education, we wondered how we keep distance learning equitable. Or rather, how do we apply a rural metric to what kind of by default is possibly an urban tool? We wondered, what does professionalizing the field and the credentializing process mean in terms of cultural equity in distance learning? And finally, technically, we wondered what constitutes intellectual theft in the context of distance learning, and how do we safeguard against it while ensuring accessibility?
Great, thank you so much. And finally, Renee Akbar.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Renee Akbar. I am the chair of the Division of Education and Counseling at Xavier University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Working with Matt on a couple of proposals, and one in particular is looking at how we can involve educators in performance art, and the performance art would be geared around teaching children about mathematics. So I'm very happy to be online to hear all of these great questions and rant. I do not have a rant, just wanted to introduce myself.
Thank you so much. And so with that, we're going to move on into the panel discussion portion of the call. Matt, you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks. So thanks for the great ranting. I appreciate it. And there is no bad rants. There is only bad ranters. So you all did great. Thank you. So I've asked these three people to talk with us for about 3 minutes each, and then I'll ask them some questions at the end. And it's really just a kind of expanded rant, but a little more thoughtful. And I've chosen the three folks based on some sense of being in different perspectives on a spectrum of comfort or experience with distance learning, but also because they're really cool people and they're smart, and I want to hear what they have to say. So I'm going to ask Adam to speak, Adam Bush, and then I'm going to ask Dee, and then I'm going to ask Carlton in that order. I think that's what the order is. Adam, Carlton, and Dee is what I meant. Adam, Carlton, and Dee.
So I'm speaking from Providence, Rhode Island, and from the institution called College Unbound. Approved in 2015, we're a degree completion school with a major in organizational leadership and change. Students come to us with traumatic experiences in higher ed, where they haven't been allowed or empowered to feel full participants in their learning. And to them and for us, college needs to feel very, very different. That means different on-ground sports like free childcare and dinner with each meeting, as well as different ways to think about where and when that learning can happen. And the where and when is often what distance learning itself addresses. But also critical questions like who counts as faculty, what counts as learning, and how assessment can be different. Students are required in our program to have a 3-hour in-person seminar each week, as well as a one-on-one meeting with a faculty advisor. But that happens in person in that one-on-one meeting with me, or through a Zoom call like this at 10 p.m. when they get home from work, or as 15 text messages back and forth over the course of the day. We're currently in the middle of our accreditation visit. In fact, yesterday we had our official accreditation visit, and we're thinking not only about not just online and on ground, not even how blended learning, as the name of it, because that's just really thought of as a combo pack. We're trying to think about how creatively what unbound learning can be. When we say we go online to get offline, we aspire to be both high tech and high touch. And too often online ed is asynchronous learning. And that's all kind of personalization means for online. We want to understand it as new ways to communicate and new ways to do research. We want online as an excuse to do community building and to connect across place, so that as we build partnerships, like with the Ashe Cultural Arts Center in New Orleans, our curriculum then is facilitating and helping Ashe then connect with other cultural arts centers throughout the country to do movement building work. Too often in online course development, professors are hired to create courses that can then be plug and played by any professor moderating course content. That's not what this is about. Our online courses are facilitated by course-based instructional faculty that we hire, but they're always complemented by the weekly required on-ground seminar, weekly one-on-one meetings with advisors, and weekly meetings between the students' personal learning networks, where the students asked to really bring in other members. And they're not just creating work for a faculty, they have a project that runs throughout their college experience and beyond. And so the courses are at the service of the project. They're never designing assignments for the sake of a course. College Unbound's online learning management system is designed as an e-portfolio interface where students create their own homepages, an active and ever-evolving archive for their work. But instructional faculty too are asked to create their own personal portfolios as part of the course design process. So there's no course homepage. There's no Blackboard system where just faculty members interact throughout that discussion board. There's only people pages. And course instructors are asked to continue relationships with students beyond the confines of a semester. Students are asked to comment on their peers' work throughout the week so that student interaction online is always tied to the development of their portfolio practice. I can go on and on. I want to cut myself off, but I'm also going to post the link to my College Unbound Digication site. Just like the students, I keep a weekly personal learning plan, so you can follow along and kind of see how I'm interacting with the space, similar to any of my students. And anyone that wants guest access, I'm happy to provide as well to our Digication space. So, Matt,
Thank you, Aaron.
Got it.
Did even better than I thought you might. That's great. Thanks. Mr. Turner, Carlton Turner, Executive Director of Alternate Routes.
Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone out there in this virtual land. I want to start by saying I'm a proud graduate of the College Unbound program under Adam Bush as my advisor and through Ashe Cultural Arts Center. And I had a great deal of respect for that program and how it's evolving. So I had the precarious task given to me by Matt to give the problems. So he posted me up to talk about why it won't work. And so these aren't my views. These aren't my only views, but these are the views that I'm going to share in response to the prompt. So one, of course, and this is not anything that anybody doesn't already know, that distance learning is not a replacement for face-to-face interaction. And it shouldn't be thought of as such. There are limits to what can be communicated and thus received in this transaction and this relationship and through this medium that we have to keep first and foremost. And why that's important is because what we're talking about is not just distant learning for distant learning's sake. We're talking about particularly community-based arts. And so face-to-face interaction, human connections, these are fundamental and foundational parts of community arts that virtual platforms fall far short of being able to create a proper container to hold the type of learning that is necessary in order to develop this particular practice in its most full sense. There are a lot of university programs, classes that are talking about community-based arts in a theoretical format, and I think that this space is a space that could work to talk about the theory of community-based art, but it is not a platform that can be effective in terms of teaching practice of what the art community-based arts look like, or community arts looks like. So there's that difference and that disconnection that we have to be well aware of as we venture into this space. I remember as a high school student back in the 1990s, probably when Matt was doing his graduate program, there were young people secluded in these like closeted structures within my small high school that were taking these distant learning classes. And those classes were usually left for students that were remedial. It was a place to marginalize students and not a place where students were really given the freedom to to develop and expand their creativity and access, but one that actually stunted their ability to engage with the larger population of the school. I also wanted to just put out there that we have to recognize these issues of cultural equity and access that still plague us. So rural broadband and widespread internet access continue to be issues that challenge our communities and the work that we do. Me, as a person who lives in Utica, Mississippi, and it's not close to much of anything in terms of infrastructure, but had this conference happen last week this time, I would not be able to participate in the video aspect of it because I had already used up my month's data cap allowance. So those are all barriers to participation in the fullest sense that we have to keep and recognize. The last thing I'll say is that maybe that was the last thing I had to say. So I'll just stop there, and I think my 3 minutes up.
Thank you, Carlton. And I want to mention to Adam and Dee that, you know, as once we hear Dee, I'm going to ask each of you to, if you have comments about one another's comments. So feel free to prepare, and Carlton the same. Dee Boyle Clapp from Arts Extension at University of Amherst. You're on.
Great, thanks. I'm going to use the phone. Thanks for having me. When we talked, my first interpretation was I was thinking arts management because we teach arts management classes. And I wanted to change what I talked about earlier today because I'm thinking more about what you asked for, which was be provocative. And I'm just going to challenge a few things. I, first of all, want to say I love online learning. I got my second master's online. I've been teaching online since forever, like at least 8 years now, maybe 9. And I enjoy the platform. We at the Arts Extension Service have been teaching online since 1998. We've been on this for a long, long time. We have a national and an international program. And I really appreciated what Carlton just said about broadband, because it's not only rural, it's international. These are issues that everybody deals with. But the things I wanted to focus on were a little different. One of them is the idea that should you do this work in community, I want you to think about or consider the differentiation with other institutions so that this does remain unique, and figure out some path that's going to be accessible, interesting, different, so that it's not the same stuff. There's a glut in certain regions of what's been taught, and this is an opportunity to start fresh, and I think that's a really cool opportunity for you guys to be thinking about. I also was really thinking about the concerns about people being able to afford the classes. And we talked a little bit about what the structure might be for you in terms of what the class might be. You had answered back that you were thinking that it might be communities and partners within communities. We get asked all the time, well, my husband and I are going to open up this arts entrepreneurship thing. We're going to open up a new nonprofit. Can we just sign up once and then we share the class, we both take it? And we can't. That's not what our university allows us to do. So thinking about that may be an issue. The other thing was, the idea of board members, et cetera, the same kind of concept. And then the other thing I was thinking about is just like communicating, if this is work for social justice or work for art and communities, however you want to define it. I just want to share a story that this past weekend I did an artist in business training, and we had a musician who does work with social justice, and she does a lot of work on incarceration. And she was negotiating a contract with somebody, and she was actually sharing her price sheet with them. So they wanted her to basically perform for free. And we get this all the time where people don't recognize that we're a business. I'm so sorry, but oh my God, we're part of a business that wants us to be a business. And in dealing with this, people often come to us and want us to give them, give them classes, trainings for free, just as they wanted this performer who's working with equity and trying to say that we all require pay, we all deserve pay, and yet they wanted her to work for free. So just addressing how you're going to do that, whether it's scholarships, whether it's foundation support, whatever. So I believe I'm out of time. Okay.
Thanks, Dee.
Mm-hmm.
So if all three of you could have your unmute yourselves so we can maybe do this kind of quickly, because I'm sensing, I'm so pleased with how many people are here and wanting to hear some other voices. But I guess I'd like to ask particularly Dee and Adam first. How do you think the online environment changes the role of instructor? Can you synopsize that for us, perhaps? Dee, you first.
Sure. I think that the instructor becomes a partner in so many ways, that you set up a scenario, you create a community where people feel welcomed, and that you set it up so that people feel like they can share their innermost secrets. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and the things that I love the most are that once people feel relaxed and comfortable and that they can trust each other, we also make it a point that people realize from day one that what comes to class stays in class, your secrets are safe, that it's a safe place for people to share what their real issues are. We talk about their boards, their finances, their troubles. It's really an interesting kind of thing. I think the role is to basically be the facilitator.
Okay. Actually, Carlton, I'm sorry, you mentioned you were a student in a program. How do you see the role of the teacher changing? And then we'll go to Adam.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I was involved in classes with very different instructors. So those that were affiliated with the university, the more formal institution, there was a very rigid relationship there because I was one of a number of students that really were interfacing only through this online portal. Whereas my relationship with Adam, even though we had known each other before, but this was our first real time working together, first time really working together. The opportunities to be flexible in design and to create something that worked for everyone were really apparent, and so those were two really unique and very different relationships that I had to think about very closely in terms of how I manage my life inside of those, the way that I had to respond and engage with those two different types of instructors. And so that's something that I think is really important for me as a takeaway, and thinking about how do I continue my education, especially, you know, recognizing that distance would be the way that probably would continue to happen. But I'm not sure I could do that if I don't have the same kind of flexibility that I had to develop programs and engagement strategies with Adam.
Thanks. Adam, your thoughts?
So I guess it's like things that are very natural to people in this conversation, in how we teach and the space we create is very connected to the ethos of online education, about open source and about possibilities to new information and new connections. And there's learning spaces like peer-to-peer university that I think connect to that well, where anyone can create a class and anyone can invite others in and blah, blah. I think the problem happens a lot of time when it's translated into higher education, and especially higher education institutions that build infrastructure for online education really because of its ability to scale and its ability to work with lots of students really fast. And that's when I think people push away the values that people here hold dear about how they create classrooms, or how they think about community-based arts, and how they think about collaborative work. And so that stuff gets shoved to the side a lot of times. I mentioned the example about course creation. That's what happens in a lot of very conservative online institutions, where someone is hired to create a class, and then that class is created, and any faculty that's hired is hired to teach that class as it is, with the discussion questions as they are, because they're put in by the IT person, and their relationship is as facilitator, but not as course creator or someone who can work within the content to respond to student needs. I think there's ways to push against that, and Matt, you can certainly speak to that too as a faculty member. But you have to be creative in institutions that aren't built for that.
Yeah. Can I jump back in?
Yes.
I said facilitator, but I really want to say that we hire people who know the content. That is our work, etc. We also offer we have two different groups of people that are simultaneously in the same classes. We have folks who are taking it for non-credit who are, we teach arts management. So our classes are for folks learning, and they're already the folks who are running their own institutions, but they're coming back for more information and knowledge. We also have students who are in our, it's called University Without Walls. It's folks who basically, like you're saying, had started a university system and then dropped out and then came back. So our folks are different in some regards. But we also have international students who are looking for what they can't find in their own countries or in their own communities. So there's a lot of variety. I said facilitator because I feel like that's part of our job, but the main part always is education. What am I trying to teach? Because that's my job. And this is the stuff that we need to teach. But I totally agree with you about it. Don't be rote. I can't stand MOOCs for that particular reason. Okay.
So because we have so many great folks in this meeting, what I'd like to do is, panelists, if you have questions for one another, if you could run your questions through a chat message to Tia like everybody else. So we'll kind of move into the large question and answer period now. Tia, can you take over?
Sure. Hi, everyone. You can hear me? Okay, fantastic. So we're having a very fruitful and thoughtful conversation. And if you have any questions or anyone who has not contributed yet, just message me and I can acknowledge you. And then you can ask your question. You could just unmute and ask your question. And for any one of the panelists, and then we can go proceed that way. So just send me a message, anyone?
So Tia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Carol Bebel, so I'm not on Zoom.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So you have a question?
Well, question, comment. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the whole notion of this non-traditional and traditional student, and also the demographics, age particularly, in terms of whether they're a non-traditional student, somebody who started and quit long time ago versus a younger student. The socialization processes for these two populations are decidedly different. And the bravery to make the decision to decide to jump back into higher education often comes with it a lot of insecurity. And the absence of having a way in which you're able to foster confidence and support for students becomes a major issue. And so I look at our experience with the two cohorts we worked with at our Chicago Cultural Arts Center and College Unbound. And so our first cohort was primarily in a traditional format with distance learning as a support. And we were able to carry through a sizable number of the students through the end of the curriculum. When we moved to the second cohort, however, when we started using the distance learning format, and again, the types of students were very similar. Non-traditional, had gone to school, were older. We really didn't get very far with that curriculum, and those students. And so I think a function of being able to customize to the student has got to be in the hands of the facilitative teacher, or we lose the ability to be able to take care of a certain profile of student compared to a younger student who is probably has a shorter memory and maybe less trauma in terms of what it is that happened to them when they stepped away from being in college. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in.
All right, great. Thank you. Any one of the panelists would like to respond to Charlene?
I can jump in real quick. I agree with part of that. I think that makes sense. Because we're a larger system, we work with University Without Walls. We are one of the departments that teach within this. And the system that is set up is that people have to actually apply to become a part of the University Without Walls. And they go through the regular academic program. They have to finish what they've taken. And they are assigned an advisor who basically has a boatload of experience, and they're all wonderful people. I've met everybody, and I think they're fabulous. And they are the first point of contact, and they carry these students through the balance of whatever time they're going to take. We have people who basically need 12 credits to people who've only taken 12 credits. So there's a really wide gamut. And those folks, every single student who walks through does not unlike what you guys are saying. They have a portfolio that they have to work with. It's kept at the office within the university within the walls. So I agree with you, but there's also this layering of administrative support, staff support, and then educators. So I think that people walk in with this particular system. It sounds slightly similar to what you guys are doing with lots of support.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment on Carol's questions or comments? Anyone? Okay, Charlene has a question.
Yes, hi. This is actually to anyone on Zoom today. To Carlton's point about the effectiveness and possibility to doing this, the community-based arts, specifically online in this format, I'm wondering if anybody has any stories or tools or tips or anecdotes where things went well or went awry, particularly for community-based arts.
All right. This is an open question or just for the panelists? Charlene?
Yeah, anyone really.
Anyone would like to chime in?
Yeah. Well, this is Carol again. We did a dance, an African dance workshop with Baba Chuck Davis, and about 3 or 4 locations were a part of it. So it was a concentrated weekend. It wasn't a course. And the capacity to essentially translate dance and then the instruction that came with dance was of course the best where he was actually operating, and it was also strong in other places where there was at least another master in the class that was being taught. When we were working in an instance where we had dancers, there wasn't an established leader there, it worked out to not be as successful. And so you could see by virtue of looking at the 3 locations, who was kind of coming along and who it was that was having a harder time following along.
Carol, when you did that, were you doing the simultaneous
yeah, we were.
video?
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
And so we were teaching a lot about, African to American history, as well as rhythms and dance and purpose for dance, the culture that kind of came along with the dance. So there was didactic stuff as well as teaching choreography. And so it was really interesting to see that too. Again, when you had a master there to be able to facilitate whatever the gaps were, then things worked out a lot better than in the instance when you had, dancers not necessarily accomplished in African dance who found themselves sometimes struggling a little bit to be able to kind of keep up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hey, Brandon also had a question. Brandon, would you like to ask your question to the panel or to anyone who would like to respond?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, my colleague here, Caden Laptad, and I have been listening to the panel, and we really appreciate the comments and insights that each of you have shared. And I think a few of you had mentioned or referenced how online learning spaces can be connected or leveraged to support broad-based organizing. We're just interested in hearing more about some of the rationale and philosophical elements of your programs and how that is supported to achieve those efforts. Just in the sense of, is it integrated within the programming, or is it something that the students are finding passion around and moving beyond to work towards those goals? Or, how does that play out in the specific context that you're speaking to?
Anyone would like to respond to Brandon's question?
I would like to see if Dudley or Amy have any thoughts about that, if they haven't done it already, if they have thought about it.
Sorry, we've got this crazy camera that it seems fixated on me. And so, right. Well, I mean, when we were talking about our thoughts based on the reading, a word that kept coming up was populist. We're a populist organization, and this technology, I think it wants to be populist. By definition, it should and could be populist if we make the means of accessing it equitable. So I don't necessarily have a story to share because I'm very new with the organization. But when it comes to our community cultural development, it requires a high degree of agency from participants. So this kind of model that we're talking about in any kind of education, for us, it's, we've got a website that has the means of participation sort of laid out for would-be participants to come and propose a collaboration with us. It's a form of distance learning, I think, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think one of the images playing with here is what would happen here, Amy and I. What would distance learning mean to the Mississippi Freedom Movement in 1962? How would this this distance learning empower that real bottom-up community movement? And how would it help embolden that kind of community knowledge, that broad-based community knowledge? So that's just an image that comes to me as a kind of a student of the 60s freedom movement, trying to think about, okay, now with these new tools, given the success of that movement or the many successes of that movement, how could we apply this new technology to some of those same goals, the same social justice goals that existed then? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great question, and we'll have to figure out answers as we go along.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Some of those same principles can be applied within the infrastructure. For instance, you'll notice today that our artistic director is sitting right here, and he's got 40 years of experience working in nonprofit and cultural organizing. But we're using this technology now for me to be able to meet you guys, hear your questions, and advance some of our ideas in exchange. So this is a form of distance learning for me, this communication. So that's another layer of it.
Sure, absolutely. We have one more question from Heidi. Heidi, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so I was kind of keying in on Carlton's comment about the community arts face-to-face interactions are necessary. And I understand that completely as an artist myself. But I have a question, and I guess this is kind of similar to what the earlier question was, but are there some theories, some ideas of how to connect community that deaf really need? This is their community, this is their online community, for a variety of reasons. It could be accessibility, it could be, I live in a rural part of Minnesota that is, people think I'm crazy because I drive 3 hours to the University of Minnesota every week. And so I'm just, I'm looking to connect groups, but community is defined not by a geographic location or a neighborhood or a community like my small town where we're divided, but we're all at different dinner tables. You know what I mean? So we kind of have this really interesting opportunity play around with this type of technology. And yet I've never really thought about it until like literally I signed up for this, you know? And so whether it's you, Carlton, or anybody else in this room that might have some ideas of what's your big dreams as far as how to get community built. And I think of social issues as well, and the rural communities that seem like we're responsible for people getting voted into things. And you know, we won't go there, but you know, for the most part, it's like, how do we connect people that you would be surprised that they would connect? If they were in the same neighborhood, they would be on the same picket line, but they're not. So there, it's not really a question.
Yeah. I mean, this is Carol, and I'm just saying, if we're just talking about the things that we could think of, we talk about world citizens, for instance, and we often wind up voicing what we think other people believe, think, and live. And so in an educational construct, it would be fabulous to be in community in a world way with people around the world, learning together and being able to have first voice on all of these things. And so in an aspirational world, that's the kind of opportunity that distance learning makes possible. My first kind of rub with it was in 2005 in South Africa, when somebody just in a presentation said that the University of South Africa had the largest distance learning population in the world. And I went, huh? You know, and so this whole notion of being able to aspire to learn about each other, first voice one to the other, becomes one of the things, and therefore to leverage what are similar issues and to be able to mobilize about them around the world, and not just necessarily in your village, city, state, or country, is like the ultimate thing that could wind up happening, you know. But it begins with the acculturation to this style of community making not as an alternative, but as one of many diverse ways in which we make community, you know. And so from the social perspective, it's like we don't want to give up the face-to-face or the social, the connect, the touch. We want to be able to manage to emulate the things that are generated there in other kinds of connections as well, understanding that the central pivotal thing is, of course, hand to hand, heart to heart, you know, body to body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. Can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
I think what I feel like what we're doing is, and I think what my understanding, what Matt was thinking about, was that you're training the trainers in some regard. It's like that first level, and then those people are going to be like the central hub that will go back out into their own communities and connect everybody. So you got to start somewhere. It's almost like nonviolent training. You need to train everybody first before you can go out and start doing more things and get others involved. So there's a lot of layers to it, but this might be the first spark, training the first spark and going out from there.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have a burning comment or question that they just have to get out, or a contribution before we transition? No? Okay, well, I'll pass it back over to Matt. Thank you all for your questions and responses. I think it was very fruitful, and I learned a great deal. I guess we just have to work on understanding or reimagining this sense of place, and highlighting new ways to imagine how we can communicate in non-virtual spaces, and really focus on that to really develop this platform. Matt?
Thanks, Tia. I'm gonna, if folks can stay another 10 minutes, we're going to do a brief commercial for you about the Xavier program that we're developing, and then we're gonna have a time for closing announcements and next steps. It might even be less than 10 minutes. If you need to go, I totally understand. I know Carlton had to leave. We do plan on sharing a contact list of all the participants. Holly, thank you for nodding your head. If anybody prefer not to be included, message Holly, and you won't be included. But seems like this is a good group that's may be interested in staying together. So keeping the discussion going. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to open this slide presentation. And this is really, this is what Tia and Renee on the line and Ron Bechet and others are working on with me to develop a certificate program. It would be designed for professionals at Xavier, and it would be like Dee is suggesting, it would be training the trainers. Our vision is to train high school teachers, high school science and math teachers, how to coach teams of high school students, as peer educators. The students in our program, the high school teachers, would learn everything they needed. They would be really provided with a pretty detailed plan for how they would do that. And they would earn continuing education units, and they would get continued professional development opportunities. It would also be, this thing is hiding some of my, it would be delivered using a hybrid of distance and learning and distance and residential learning activities. The 12-month curriculum that we're imagining would have 3 elements to it. A 1-week residential program intensive here in New Orleans, a distance learning program that would take 10 months and really be primarily oriented around the notion of reflective practice. Wouldn't be a whole lot of new content. It would be using the distance learning structure to keep people connected with each other and with the faculty as they are implementing what they've learned. And then they would come back to New Orleans for 3 days in the following summer to finish their program and to bring some of their young people together, almost in a kind of a games, kind of Olympic kind of notion. It's based on the notion of there being 5 curriculum elements: the culture of peer education, the games and exercises that they're going to teach the students to teach, their ability to work on social arts and social change projects, their ability to develop partnerships. So the notion of a coach is a hub notion, that the coach is a point of contact and a leader within a multi-organizational partnership in each community that participates. So it would be a university, a school district, and schools, along with community-based organizations that would commit to participating in this certificate program. And then lastly, there would be an evaluation component that would be taught to the students, including what instruments they could use, what techniques they would use to gather data around program impact at the individual, the school, and the community level. It's based upon lots of different programmatic models that have been out there, including my own from a program called Creative Forces that I did here after the storm, and the beginner's guide that I worked on, but also stuff from Project Zero, from the literacy world, and hopefully from as many of you all who are interested in participating as possible, because I'm really trying to, we are really trying to take a kind of action research approach to the development of the program. We are looking to recruit at least 4 other communities other than New Orleans by December. And in order to do that, we're developing some proposals for workshops at different conferences around the country. And we'll have a broader public announcement in January. It's still very much emerging, but this is our this is our emergent model. I don't know, Tia, maybe I don't want to take too much more people's time, but maybe you could add something that I've missed.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job, Matt, of covering all the bases. Does anyone have any questions about our proposal or what we're doing?
This is Michelle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering if you folks have something that you're sending out to folks to kind of have a little bit more detail about what it, the kind of partners you're looking for and that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yes. We have to get our act together a little bit more tightly, and which is to say, I come up with these crazy ideas in the office that you see right here, and then I have to, vet them. So we're in the process of vetting, and I would say that in the next month or so, we will be reaching out to folks who may be interested. And that would include everybody on this list.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, Michelle, for asking. So I would say, I'll have to go back to this and stop sharing my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, everybody.
There you go, Matt.
So is everybody seeing my? Mm-hmm. No. Anyway,
you just go down to the bottom of this.
There it is.
Yep.
So thanks everybody for listening to our commercial. Holly, you want to bring us home?
Yep, so we're gonna wrap up here. It seems like this discussion has been really rich and useful. Matt and we talked a little bit about the potential of doing a second call. Matt, do you want to just lay the groundwork for a possible second online conversation with Bill Cleveland?
So I haven't gotten him to say yes yet, so I hesitate to do this, but I know that Bill has been working on a national study, and Dee, maybe you've been involved in this, I'm not sure, but national study concerning distance learning programs. And even though the focus of the study isn't community-based arts as such, I believe that that's what his work is, or the clients that he's working for are interested in. I was thinking that maybe his thoughts, if not the formal findings, might be a good beginning point for a second discussion.
Okay. I don't know what he's working on right now, but he's great, and I think he's just amazing. He's a really amazing thinker. So I'd be happy to see more about it.
Yeah, thanks. And I'd also be very open to anybody on this call sending me a thought about what a second one would look like. I'm not promising to do more than two, but the response to this one seemed to be more than one would be able to contain. So that was my thought.
Mm-hmm.
Holly?
Great, so we'll look forward to that. In the nth hour here, does anyone have any final ideas or thoughts or comments, announcements related to this? Anything at all that they want to share before we depart?
Just a thank you to Matt for doing this, and particularly highlighting cultural arts and community organizing as something that would be created to distance learning and would be the focus of how to do it and do it better.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Matt and Tia, for your great work and for stimulating this conversation among IA's network, which we hope to continue on.
Have a good day, everybody.